The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the storm as I pulled into my childhood driveway, my car packed so full with boxes and garbage bags that Ethan and Lily could barely see out the windows. 6 hours of driving through sheets of rain, my divorce papers still damp from tears in the passenger seat, my last eviction notice crumpled in the cup holder like a surrender flag. "Is this Grandma's house?" Lily asked from her car seat, her 6-year-old voice small and uncertain. She'd been asking questions all day that I didn't know how to answer. Why did Daddy leave? Why can't we go home? Why are all our things in trash bags? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if the story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Yes, sweetheart, I managed, my throat tight. This is where Mommy grew up. Ethan, wise beyond his 9 years, studied the house through the rain-streaked window. "It looks different," he said quietly. New paint, new shutters, new landscaping. Everything carefully manicured and expensive looking. My parents had clearly been busy spending money they'd never offered to share when their daughter was drowning. I gathered what courage I had left and made a run for the front door, leaving the kids buckled safely in the car. The rain soaked through my thrift store jacket in seconds, but I barely felt it. All I could think about was getting my children somewhere warm and dry, somewhere they could sleep in real beds instead of the back seat of our Honda. My knock echoed hollow against the mahogany door I remembered painting with my father when I was 12. That felt like a lifetime ago, back when I believed parents were supposed to protect their children no matter what. "Marissa?" My mother's voice came through the door, surprised but not pleased. The deadbolt turned, then the chain rattled, and finally the door opened just wide enough for her perfectly made-up face to appear. Even at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night, Judith Lane looked like she was ready for the country club. Not a gray hair out of place, pearls gleaming at her throat. "Mom," relief flooded my voice. "Thank God you're home. We need help. David cleaned out our bank accounts before he left, and the landlord—" "What are you doing here?" she interrupted, not opening the door any wider. Behind her, I could see the warm glow of the living room, hear the television playing some cooking shows she'd always loved. "I told you on the phone. We got evicted. I have the kids in the car, and we have nowhere else to—" "I told you we'd think about it," she said sharply. "We never said yes." The words hit like a slap. I stared at her, rain dripping from my hair onto her pristine doormat. "Mom, it's pouring. The kids haven't eaten since this morning. I just need—" "Your sister is using your old room now. She's starting her interior design business. She needs the space for client meetings." My stomach dropped. "What? Your sister has real potential, Marissa. She can't be working out of her bedroom forever." Behind me, I heard the car door open. Ethan's voice cut through the storm. "Mom, Lily's crying. She's scared." I turned to see my 9-year-old son standing in the rain, his thin frame shaking, trying to comfort his little sister who was sobbing in her car seat. They looked so small, so vulnerable, still wearing the clothes they'd slept in because we'd left everything else behind. "Mom, please," I whispered, turning back to face her. "Look at them. They're just babies. We'll figure something out. But tonight—" "Your father and I are not responsible for your poor choices. You married that gambler against our advice. You refused to listen when we told you to get a prenup. You made your bed." The door started to close, but I pressed my palm against it. "Where are we supposed to go?" "That's not our problem." And then I heard him, my father's voice from somewhere behind her, gravelly and dismissive. "Let her figure it out, Judith. She's 32 years old." The door slammed shut. I stood there in the rain staring at the brass nameplate that still read, "The Lane Family," feeling something crack open in my chest. Not my heart, that had already been shattered by David's betrayal, by the eviction notice, by watching my children's world crumble. This was something deeper, something that had been holding me together, finally giving way. Ethan appeared beside me, his small hand slipping into mine. "Mom, are we going to be okay?" Before I could answer, headlights swept across the driveway. Vanessa's BMW pulled up behind my battered Honda, and my younger sister stepped out into the rain like she was walking a red carpet. Designer boots, pristine coat, not care in the world. She grabbed several shopping bags from her back seat, bags I recognized from stores I couldn't afford even when I had a job. The little girl who'd once cried in the rain was gone forever. In her place was a woman who'd learned that the best revenge isn't just living well, it's making sure the people you love never have to live through what you survived. And that, I thought as I turned off the lights and headed to my own room, was a pretty good way to win. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us. They're moving to one of those senior apartment complexes, she'd said, her voice hollow with defeat. The kind with tiny kitchens and shared laundry facilities. Mom keeps crying about having to get rid of her china cabinet because it won't fit. I'd listened without commenting, thinking about the night my children and I had huddled in the back seat of my car with nowhere to go. I know you hate us, Vanessa had continued, and I guess we deserve it. But they're old, Marissa. This is killing them. They'll survive, I'd said simply. People are stronger than they think. I should know. What I didn't tell Vanessa was that I'd already made arrangements. Through a series of carefully anonymous transactions, I'd paid the deposit and first 6 months' rent on a decent assisted living apartment across town. Nothing fancy, but clean and safe, with a small garden view and a kitchenette that could accommodate most of my mother's precious china. They'd never know the money came from me. As far as they'd ever be aware, some charity organization had sponsored their housing. Let them keep whatever dignity they had left. I wasn't cruel, I just wasn't family anymore. "Mom, are you coming?" Lily called from the car. At 10 years old, she was growing into someone confident and kind, secure in the knowledge that her mother would always fight for her. "You said we could get ice cream after this." "Coming, sweetheart," I called back, taking one last look at the house. I felt empty, mostly. Not disappointed or unsatisfied, just complete in a way I hadn't expected. The anger that had driven me for so long was gone, burned away by success and time, and the simple peace that comes from knowing your children will never experience what you experienced. The drive home took us past Mel's Diner, where this whole journey had really begun. Through the windows, I could see Kathy taking an order from a family with young children, her maternal warmth extending to strangers the way it had once saved us. William was behind the counter, probably explaining to some other desperate person that there were ways to rebuild from nothing if you were willing to work. I still stopped by the diner every few weeks, not out of obligation, but out of genuine affection. These people had been my family when I needed one most. The difference between chosen family and blood family, I'd learned, was that chosen family earned their place every day. At home, our real home, the Victorian I'd renovated with my own hands, Ethan was waiting with homework spread across the kitchen table. At 14, he was taller than me now, with his father's height, but his mother's determination. He'd watched my transformation from victim to victor, absorbed lessons about resilience and justice that no school could teach. "How did it go?" he asked without looking up from his algebra. "It went exactly as it needed to go," I said, ruffling his hair as I passed. "The house sold to a nice family. The old owners found somewhere else to live. Everyone's where they belong now." He nodded, accepting this with the wisdom of someone who'd learned early that actions have consequences. "Good. Can you help me with number 12? I think I'm missing something." This is what mattered. Not the revenge, not the poetic justice of owning my parents' mortgage, but the quiet certainty that my children would never doubt they were loved, never question whether their mother would fight for them, never spend a single night wondering if family meant anything at all. That evening, as I did every night, I checked on both kids before going to bed. Lily was curled up with 3 stuffed animals and a library book, completely secure in her small pink kingdom. Ethan had kicked off his blankets, but was sleeping peacefully, his face relaxed in a way that spoke of a child who'd never worried about where he'd wake up the next morning. Standing there in their doorway, I thought about that terrible night in the rain, about the woman I'd then been, broken, desperate, begging for mercy from people who felt nothing. That woman was gone, transformed by necessity into someone who could provide what she'd never received: unconditional protection, unwavering support, the absolute certainty that family meant something. The rain was falling again tonight, gentle drops against the windows of the house I owned, the house that no one could take away from us. But inside, my children slept warm and dry and loved, dreaming whatever dreams children dream when they know they're safe. I'd kept every promise I'd made that night in the motel room. I built something that couldn't be stolen, created security that didn't depend on other people's kindness, given my children a foundation that would never crumble. And if in the process I'd taught some other people about consequences, if I'd shown them what it felt like to lose everything because of cruelty, if I'd made them understand that the daughter they'd thrown away had become someone they should have treasured, well, that was just good business. The rain continued to fall, washing the world clean for another day. Inside our home, 3 people slept soundly, secure in the knowledge that morning would bring them nothing but possibility. It had taken almost 3 years, but I'd finally come home. Not to a building or an address, but to the peace that comes from knowing you're exactly where you belong with exactly the family you've chosen to build.
The silence that followed was absolute. Not just at our table, but it felt like the entire coffee shop had gone quiet, though I knew that was impossible. They stared at me like I'd suddenly started speaking a foreign language. "What?" Vanessa whispered. I opened the folder and spread the documents across the table. The mortgage transfer, the LLC paperwork, the deed that showed Meridian Properties, my company, as the legal holder of their debt. "Meridian Properties is mine," I explained, my voice steady and professional. "I bought your defaulted mortgage 3 weeks ago, which means I now have the legal right to foreclose on your house." My father's hands were shaking as he picked up the documents. This is impossible." "Actually, it's just business. The same kind of business that bought me financial security while you were teaching me about independence." My mother was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. "You planned this. You planned this whole thing." "No," I said truthfully. "I didn't plan it, but when the opportunity presented itself, I took it. The same way you took the opportunity to throw your daughter and grandchildren out in the rain because it was more convenient than showing compassion." Vanessa leaned forward. "Marissa, we can work this out. Family doesn't destroy family." I almost laughed at that. "Family? You mean like when you took my childhood bedroom for your office while my children cried in the rain? That kind of family?" "We made a mistake," my father said, his voice barely audible. "We were wrong. We're sorry." Sorry. The word I'd wanted to hear for so long. And now that it was here, it felt hollow, empty, too little and far too late. "I'm sure you are sorry. Sorry that your gamble on Vanessa's success failed. Sorry that you leveraged everything on someone who's never had to work for anything. Sorry that your cruelty to me didn't break me the way you expected it to." "What do you want?" my mother asked. "Money. We'll find a way to pay you back." "With what? Vanessa's failed business? Your retirement accounts that you already cashed out? Your good intentions?" I stood up, gathering my documents. "You have 30 days. That's the legal minimum notice period. Use them wisely." "Marissa, wait." Vanessa grabbed my arm as I prepared to leave. "What would it take? What do you want from us?" I looked down at her hand on my arm, then at their faces, desperate, frightened, finally understanding that actions have consequences. "I want you to remember," I said quietly, "what it felt like to beg for mercy from someone who holds your future in their hands. I want you to remember the sound of rain on your roof while you sleep in a bed that might not be yours much longer. And I want you to understand that everything you're feeling right now, the fear, the helplessness, the knowledge that your family doesn't care enough to save you, that's exactly what you put me through." I pulled free from Vanessa's grip and walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard my mother start to cry, not the delicate tears of someone used to sympathy, but the raw, broken sobs of someone who'd finally realized the cost of their choices. At the door, I turned back one last time. "Oh, and Vanessa, you might want to start looking for somewhere else to live. The new owner isn't planning to honor existing arrangements." I left them sitting there, surrounded by the legal documents that proved their world had been built on sand, while mine was built on the bedrock of their betrayal. The little girl they had thrown away had become the woman who could throw them away in return. And for the first time in years, that felt exactly like justice. 6 months later, I stood in the driveway of 1247 Elm Street, watching the moving truck pull away from the house where I'd grown up. The new owners, a young family with 2 children, had gotten a beautiful home at a fair price. I had made sure of that. No need to punish innocent people for my parents' mistakes. The foreclosure had proceeded exactly as legally required. 30 days' notice, followed by court proceedings that my parents couldn't contest because the debt was legitimate, and the process was followed to the letter. They hired a lawyer, of course, hoping to find some loophole or technicality that might save them. But there's no legal protection against consequences, no court that can reverse the damage done by years of choosing pride over love. Daniel Matthews, the lawyer who had helped me fight my illegal eviction all those years ago, had handled the foreclosure with professional efficiency. "Your parents' attorney called 3 times asking if there was any room for negotiation," he told me. "I told him to take it up with Meridian Properties Board of Directors." Of course, Meridian Properties Board of Directors consisted entirely of me, sitting in my home office with a cup of coffee and a clear conscience. The day before the final eviction date, Vanessa called one last time.
Ethan knocked on my office door, interrupting my thoughts. "Mom, you've been in here for hours. Are you okay?" I looked at my son, 12 years old now, tall for his age, with his father's dark eyes, but none of David's weaknesses. He'd seen me work late many nights, knew that building our security required constant attention to details others might miss. "I'm fine, buddy. Just finishing up some business." "Important business?" I looked down at the deed again, at the address where I'd grown up, where I'd learned that family loyalty was conditional, where I'd discovered that love could be withdrawn as easily as it had been given. "Yes," I said, "very important business." That night, I did something I hadn't done in months. I drove by my parents' house, parking across the street in the darkness, looking at the warm lights in the windows. They were probably inside, unaware that their daughter, the one they dismissed as a failure, now held the key to their future in her hands. The house looked smaller than I remembered, less impressive. Funny how perspectives change when you're not looking up from the bottom anymore. My phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. "Any thoughts on their situation yet? They're getting nervous." I typed back, "Working on it. These things take time." What I didn't tell her was that I was working on it from a position she couldn't possibly imagine. I was working on it as someone who had all the power now, someone who could decide their fate with a signature on a foreclosure notice. The little girl who'd been thrown out in the rain was gone forever. In her place sat a woman who owned the very roof over her parents' heads. And tomorrow it would be time to let them know exactly how completely the tables had turned. The foreclosure notice was delivered on a Tuesday morning by certified mail. I knew because I'd specifically requested the delivery confirmation. By Tuesday afternoon, my phone was ringing. "Marissa, we got a notice." Vanessa's voice was tight with panic. "They're foreclosing. We have 30 days. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, continuing to review tenant applications for my newest property while we talked. "You don't understand. 30 days. They'll lose everything. Mom's been crying for hours, and Dad, I've never seen Dad like this." I set down the applications and gave my full attention to the call. This was the moment I'd been building toward without fully realizing it. 2.5 years of climbing from nothing, of learning that the only security in this world was what you built for yourself. "Who's the mortgage holder?" I asked, though I knew the answer. "Some company called Meridian Properties. We've never heard of them. They want the full balance immediately, or they're taking the house." "That's unfortunate," I repeated, the same words I'd used weeks ago when she'd first called. "Marissa, please, I know you have money now. Could you possibly help them? Even a loan. They'd pay you back, I swear." The desperation in her voice was complete. Gone was any pretense of superiority, any hint of the smugness that had defined our relationship for decades.
She was begging me to save the people who watched us suffer in the rain and felt nothing. "I'll think about it," I said. "But Vanessa, I want to meet with all of them. This Saturday, same coffee shop." "Thank you. Thank you so much. They'll be so relieved." Saturday came with the kind of clear, cold weather that makes everything look sharp-edged and inevitable. I arrived at the coffee shop early again, but this time I wasn't nervous. I was wearing my best business suit, the one I'd bought to celebrate the purchase of my 5th property. My hair was professionally styled, my nails manicured, my entire appearance designed to project success and power. They arrived together, a united family in crisis. My parents looked like they'd aged 5 years in the 2 weeks since I'd seen them last. Vanessa clutched a folder of financial documents like they were medical records from a terminal diagnosis. "Thank you for meeting us," my mother began, but I held up a hand. "Let me save us all some time." I placed a manila folder on the table between us. "I know exactly what your financial situation is. I know about the refinancing, the business loans, the credit card debt you haven't mentioned. I know about the foreclosure notice you received on Tuesday." Their faces went white. "How do you—" my father started. "Because," I said calmly, "I own your mortgage."
"I'll think about it," I said finally. "Thank you," Vanessa said, relief flooding her voice. "I'll call you tomorrow with details about when and where." "Fine." After I hung up, I sat in my quiet living room for a long time, thinking about the strange turns life takes. 2 years ago, I'd been the one in trouble, the one who needed help, the one begging for mercy from people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Now they needed something from me. The irony was so perfect it almost hurt. The meeting was set for Saturday afternoon at a neutral coffee shop downtown. I arrived early, choosing a corner table where I could see the entire room, a habit I'd developed during my real estate dealings. Always know who's in the room and where the exits are. My parents walked in 10 minutes late, and I almost didn't recognize them. My father, always so upright and commanding, seemed smaller somehow. His shoulders had a defeated slope I'd never seen before. My mother still carried herself with dignity, but there was something fragile about the way she clutched her designer purse, like it was armor that might not hold. Vanessa, trailing behind them, looked the worst of all. Gone was the smug confidence I remembered from that rainy night. Her clothes were still expensive, but they hung differently now, like she'd lost weight she couldn't afford to lose. They sat across from me without speaking. The silence stretched until my mother finally cleared her throat. "Marissa," she began, her voice carefully controlled, "we appreciate you agreeing to meet with us." "What do you want?" I asked, the same question I'd posed to Vanessa on the phone. My father's jaw tightened at my directness, but he didn't have the luxury of pride anymore. "We're having some financial difficulties," he said stiffly. "What kind of difficulties?" "Vanessa's design business required some significant investment," my mother explained. "We refinanced the house to help her get started, and then, when the economy shifted—" She trailed off, but I could fill in the blanks. They'd leveraged their home to fund their sister's dreams, just like they'd always prioritized her over everyone else. And now those dreams had turned into a nightmare that threatened to swallow everything they'd worked for. "How much do you owe?" I asked. "The refinancing left us with a mortgage of about $250,000, my father admitted. With Vanessa's business loans, we're looking at total debt close to $400,000. I didn't react, though my mind was already calculating $400,000 in debt against a house worth maybe $300,000 in the current market. They were underwater, trapped in a financial prison of their own making. "We were hoping," my mother continued, "that you might have some advice. You've clearly done very well for yourself in real estate. Perhaps you could suggest some strategies." They wanted my expertise. The daughter they'd thrown away was now successful enough that they needed her knowledge to survive. The irony was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. "I'll look into it," I said finally. "See what options might be available." "Thank you," my father said, and the words seemed to cost him physical pain.
After they left, I sat in the coffee shop for another hour, processing what I'd learned. Then I made some phone calls. The first call was to my mortgage broker, asking about properties in foreclosure in my parents' neighborhood. The second was to my lawyer, asking about LLC structures that could provide privacy for property investments. The third was to my accountant, discussing the tax implications of acquiring distressed mortgages. It took 3 weeks to put all the pieces together, 3 weeks of research, paperwork, and very careful financial maneuvering. But when it was done, Meridian Properties LLC, a company that existed only on paper and had no obvious connection to Marissa Lane, owned the defaulted mortgage on 1247 Elm Street, my parents' house. I sat in my home office, staring at the deed that made me, effectively, their landlord. They had no idea, of course. To them, their mortgage had simply been sold to another faceless corporation, which happened all the time in the banking industry. They were probably relieved that someone had taken over the debt, assuming it bought them more time to figure out a solution. But I knew something they didn't. The new mortgage holder wasn't interested in working out payment plans or offering forbearance. The new mortgage holder had very different plans for that property.
Three-family house that needed new plumbing, then a single family that required a complete kitchen renovation, then a small apartment building with good bones but terrible management. Each property taught me something new. How to negotiate with contractors who tried to overcharge women. How to spot the difference between cosmetic damage and structural problems. How to read people well enough to separate good tenants from disasters waiting to happen. The kids and I had moved into the upstairs unit of my second property, a charming Victorian that I'd bought for a song because the previous owner had let the tenants destroy it. Ethan, now 11, had become my unofficial assistant, helping with everything from painting to showing apartments to prospective renters. Lily, 8 and fierce, appointed herself the official greeter for new tenants, charming them with her gap-toothed smile and detailed explanations of all the improvements we'd made. "Mom, Mrs. Rodriguez wants to know if she can paint her bedroom purple," Lily announced, bursting through our front door after delivering cookies to the downstairs tenant. "Tell her as long as she paints it back to white when she moves out, purple is fine," I said, not looking up from the spreadsheet I was working on. Property management was all about the details, tracking rent payments, maintenance schedules, tax deductions, insurance premiums. The numbers had to be perfect because one mistake could unravel everything I'd built. But I loved the complexity of it, loved the way each property was like solving a puzzle. How do you maximize income while keeping good tenants happy? How do you balance necessary upgrades with profit margins? How do you build wealth methodically, property by property, without overextending yourself? William had been right about the independence it created. My rental income now exceeded what I made at the diner, though I kept working there partly out of loyalty and partly because I enjoyed the routine. It grounded me, reminded me where I'd started, kept me connected to the community that had saved me when I had nothing. The legal case against my parents had settled out of court for $35,000. Not life-changing money, but enough to fund the down payment on my third property. Daniel had been triumphant about the settlement, but for me, it felt more like closure than victory. They'd been forced to acknowledge, in writing, that what they'd done was wrong. Sometimes that's all justice looks like, a signature on a legal document and a check that pays for your future. Not that my parents saw it that way. According to Kathy, who heard things through the gossip network that kept small towns informed, my father had been furious about having to pay the settlement. $35,000 for teaching that girl some responsibility? He had apparently told anyone who would listen. My mother had been more concerned about appearances, worried about what people would think. The news that their daughter had successfully sued them had spread through their social circle like wildfire, and suddenly people were asking uncomfortable questions about what exactly had happened that rainy night. But the settlement money had served its purpose. Combined with the profits from my first two properties, it had launched me into a different financial stratosphere. I was no longer scrambling to survive. I was building an empire, one carefully calculated investment at a time. The phone rang as I was finishing my monthly financial review. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. Business calls came at all hours in the property management world. "Marissa?" The voice was tentative, unfamiliar. This is your sister." I set down my pen carefully. "Vanessa?" I hadn't heard her voice in almost 2 years, not since that terrible night in the rain. "What do you want?"
I asked, keeping my tone neutral. We need to talk. And for the first time in my life, I heard something in my younger sister's voice I'd never heard before. Fear. I'm listening. Not on the phone. Can we meet somewhere? It's about Mom and Dad. They're in trouble, Marissa. Real trouble. I looked around my comfortable living room, at the art on the walls that I'd chosen, at the furniture I'd bought with money I'd earned through my own work and intelligence. I thought about my children asleep in their own rooms in a house that belonged to us, secure in a way they'd never been when we depended on other people's kindness. What kind of trouble? I asked, though part of me already suspected the answer. Financial trouble. The kind that means they might lose the house. The house. The perfect house with its perfect landscaping and perfect shutters. The house where they'd chosen my sister's comfort over my grandchildren's shelter. The house that had become, in my mind, the symbol of everything they valued more than me. That's unfortunate, I said carefully. Marissa, please. I know things ended badly between us, but they're scared. Really scared. Dad's pride won't let him ask for help, but Mom thinks maybe you could give them some advice. About finances, I mean. They know you've done well for yourself. Done well for myself. As if my success was some happy accident instead of the result of grinding work and calculated risks and refusing to give up when everything seemed impossible.
I thought about my children, about the apartment above the hardware store that we rented month to month, about the fact that we were still just one disaster away from being homeless again. I raised my hand. 37.5 from the lady in the blue blazer. Do I hear 40? The room went quiet. The other bidders were reassessing, trying to figure out if this property was worth more than they'd initially calculated. I held my breath, knowing I'd already exceeded my planned limit, praying no one would outbid me. Going once? Going twice? The auctioneer's gavel hovered in the air. Sold to bidder number 27 for $37,500. That was me. Bidder number 27. I just bought my first property. Lily clapped her hands together. Mommy, did we win? Yeah, baby, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We won. The paperwork was a blur of signatures and certified checks. Jennifer, the woman who'd given me advice, appeared at my elbow as I finished the final document. Congratulations, she said. That's a good property. I was watching it too, but you had the right instinct on the price. I have no idea what I'm doing, I confessed. None of us did when we started. But you know what? You showed up. Half of success is just showing up. That afternoon, we drove to 247 Pine Street to see what I'd bought. The duplex was a modest brick building with white trim and a small front yard that needed attention. The windows were intact, the roof looked solid, and the foundation seemed level. All good signs according to William's crash course in property evaluation. Can we go inside? Ethan asked. I pulled out the keys that now belonged to me, actual keys to actual property that no one could take away. The door opened with a satisfying click. The interior smelled musty from being vacant, but the bones were good. Hardwood floors that needed refinishing, walls that needed paint, fixtures that needed updating. But I could see the potential. In my mind's eye, I could already picture what it would look like with love and elbow grease. It's like a dollhouse, Lily said, spinning around in the empty living room. It's going to be someone's home, I corrected. Maybe two someone's homes. That evening, I called William from our apartment. I did it! I bought the duplex on Pine Street. How do you feel? He asked. Terrified, exhilarated, like I might throw up. He laughed. That sounds about right. Marissa, what you did today, that took real courage. Most people talk about investing, but you actually did it. What if I made a mistake? What if I can't find tenants? What if the repairs cost more than I budgeted? What if you succeed beyond your wildest dreams, he countered. What if this is the first property in an empire that makes you financially free? What if your kids grow up watching their mother build something from nothing? I looked through the doorway at Ethan and Lily doing homework at our small kitchen table. They were arguing about math problems, normal kid arguments, in our safe, warm apartment. For the first time in months, they seemed truly secure. Thank you, I said to William, for everything, for teaching me, for believing in me. Don't thank me yet. The real work starts tomorrow.
But Marissa, I have a feeling you're going to surprise a lot of people, including yourself. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, too wired to sleep. In my purse was a folder containing the deed to 247 Pine Street, legal proof that I owned something substantial, something valuable, something that would generate income whether I was sick or healthy, whether I had a job or not. My parents had thrown me away thinking I was weak, thinking I needed them to survive. My ex-husband had believed I'd never amount to anything without him. They were all about to learn how wrong they were. Tomorrow, I would start renovating my first property. Next month, I would find tenants. Next year, I would buy another property and another after that. I was no longer just surviving. I was building an empire, one property at a time. 18 months after that first foreclosure auction, I owned 4 properties and had waiting lists for all my units. The duplex on Maple Street had been the beginning. I'd followed it with a
People who've been kicked when they're down but refuse to stay down. People who understand that success isn't about privilege or connections. It's about persistence and smart choices. That night, I lay in our small apartment above the hardware store, listening to the sounds of Ethan and Lily breathing in the next room. Through the thin walls, I could hear Mrs. Chen practicing piano downstairs, the same Chopin piece she played every evening at 8 o'clock. In my hands was a notebook filled with everything William had taught me, pages of calculations and strategies and possibilities. For the first time since David left, since the eviction, since that horrible night at my parents' house, I felt like I was looking at a map instead of a maze. My phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Daniels. Heard from your parents' lawyer. They want to settle out of court. Let's talk tomorrow. I smiled in the darkness. The legal case was just the beginning. Seed money for something much bigger. My parents thought they'd taught me a lesson about self-reliance. They had no idea how well I'd learned it. I opened my notebook to a fresh page and wrote, Real Estate Investment Plan, Year 1. Then I began listing properties I'd drive by tomorrow, calculating possibilities, dreaming of a future where my children would never again have to depend on the kindness of others. William was right. It was time to make money work for me. The courthouse steps were slick with morning dew as I climbed toward the foreclosure auction, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my folder of documents. 3 months of studying with William, of crunching numbers and researching properties had led to this moment. You sure about this, Mom? Ethan asked, walking beside me in his best school clothes. I'd let him and Lily skip school to witness what I hoped would be the first day of our new life. No, I admitted, but sometimes you have to do things you're not sure about. The settlement from my parents had been more generous than I had expected. $50,000 to avoid the embarrassment of a public trial. Mr. Daniels had been masterful, painting a picture of wealthy grandparents throwing their own grandchildren into the rain. My parents' lawyer had practically begged them to pay rather than face a jury. Half of that settlement was now burning a hole in my checking account, waiting to be transformed from a painful memory into a profitable investment. The auction was held in a sterile conference room filled with men in expensive suits and women with designer handbags. People who looked like they belonged in this world of property and profit. I felt like a fraud in my thrift store blazer, clutching my folder of carefully researched properties like a life preserver. First time? Asked a woman sitting next to me. She was about my age, but radiated the confidence of someone who'd never been thrown out of anywhere. Is it that obvious? She smiled kindly. We all started somewhere. I'm Jennifer. Been doing this for about 5 years now. Marissa, I'm new. Word of advice? Set your limit before the bidding starts and stick to it. It's easy to get caught up in the moment and overpay. I looked down at my notes. Property address, 247 Pine Street, 2-bedroom duplex, built in 1962. Estimated repair costs, $8,000 to $10,000. Potential rental income, $1,600 per unit. Maximum bid, $35,000. The auctioneer was a thin man with a voice that carried like a carnival barker. Next property, 247 Pine Street,
duplex needs some TLC but solid bones. We'll start the bidding at $20,000. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, my shot at independence, at building something that couldn't be taken away. 20,000. Do I hear 25? A man in the front row raised his hand. 25. 30. The auctioneer's eyes swept the room. This was my chance. With sweaty palms, I raised my hand. 30. Every head in the room turned toward me. I felt like I was on stage, naked, but I kept my hand up. 32.5, called the auctioneer. The man in the front bid again. Then someone else jumped in at 35. This was my limit, the number William and I had calculated as the maximum safe investment. 37.5?
Something else entirely. Someone who knew her worth, who understood her rights, who wouldn't be dismissed or discarded. My parents had wanted to teach me about independence. They were about to get a masterclass. A week later, our time at the Sunrise Motel was up, but William had offered me something better than charity. Opportunity. He'd given me a job. "It's not much," he said as I tied an apron around my waist for the first time. "Bookkeeping, some waitressing during busy shifts, prick work in the kitchen, but it comes with steady pay and a place to think." He'd also arranged for us to rent a small apartment above the hardware store next door. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. 2 bedrooms, a tiny kitchen, and windows that looked out over Main Street. More importantly, it was a place where no one could throw our belongings in the rain. The diner became my classroom. During slow afternoon hours, William would sit across from me at the corner booth, spreading out newspapers and real estate magazines like a professor with his textbooks. "See, most people think real estate is about having money," he said, circling foreclosure listings with a red pen. "But it's really about understanding opportunity and having the courage to take calculated risks." I studied the columns of numbers, addresses, and descriptions. "I don't understand half of this." "You will." He pointed to a listing for a duplex across town. "This place, for instance, says needs work, which usually means the price is negotiable. Says estate sale, which means the family just wants it gone. Says cash offers preferred, which scares off people who need financing. I can't afford to pay cash for a house." "Not yet. But look at this." He pulled out a calculator that looked like it had survived the Carter administration. "This duplex is listed at $45,000. In this market, with some elbow grease, it could rent for $1,500 a month. Split into 2 units, that's $3,000 a month in rental income." I stared at the numbers. $3,000 a month? "Before expenses," he cautioned. "You've got taxes, insurance, maintenance, occasional vacancy. But even conservatively, you're looking at $2,000 net profit monthly. That's $24,000 a year from one property." The math was dizzying. $24,000 was more than I'd made at most of my jobs. But where would I get $45,000? William smiled. "That's where it gets interesting. You don't need $45,000. You need enough for a down payment and proof you can handle the monthly payments. With rental income, the property basically pays for itself." Over the next few weeks, between serving coffee and balancing the diner's books, William taught me about real estate like he was preparing me for a final exam. FHA loans and VA loans, cap rates and cash flow, the difference between a fixer-upper and a money pit. He showed me how to read property records, how to spot neighborhoods on the upswing, how to calculate whether a property would actually make money or just drain my bank account. "The secret," he said one afternoon while I practiced reading mortgage documents, "is to think long-term. Every month, your tenants are paying off your mortgage, building your equity. Every repair you make increases the property value. Every year, rents go up, but your mortgage payment stays the same." It sounds too good to be true. "It's not easy," he admitted. "You'll get calls at 2 a.m. about broken pipes. You'll deal with tenants who skip out on rent or trash the place. You'll spend weekends fixing toilets instead of relaxing. But Marissa, every successful person I know got there by making money work for them instead of just working for money." I thought about my parents, how they'd always made me feel like I was lazy or irresponsible for not achieving their definition of success. They'd never taught me about investing or building wealth.
They just expected me to magically figure out how to be financially stable while offering no help or guidance. "Why are you teaching me this?" I asked William one evening as he helped me understand property tax assessments. He was quiet for a long moment, staring out the diner window at the streetlights flickering on. "When Martha died, I thought my life was over. Lost my job, couldn't afford the medical bills, almost lost this place. I was angry at everyone, God, the doctors, Martha for leaving me, myself for not being stronger. Then one day, I realized I had a choice. I could stay angry and bitter, or I could use that energy to build something better. Real estate saved my life, gave me purpose again. Now I've got 6 properties, steady income, and the freedom to help people like you." "People like me?"
Interesting. He leaned back in his chair. Marissa, what your parents did, changing locks, disposing of your property, refusing you access to belongings you had stored there with their permission, that's not just cruel. In this state, it's illegal. My heart stuttered. What do you mean? Tenant rights don't just apply to people with formal leases. If someone has established residency or has permission to store belongings, there are legal protections. Your parents can't just throw your things in the rain and lock you out, especially not without proper notice. But I wasn't paying rent. Doesn't matter. You had an implied agreement, belongings stored with permission, and they disposed of your property and denied you access without following proper legal channels. He tapped his pen against the pad. We're talking about illegal eviction, destruction of property, possibly intentional infliction of emotional distress. I felt something shift inside me, a sensation like tumblers clicking into place in a lock. What does that mean exactly? It means they owe you. Money for the destroyed belongings, for the trauma, for the violation of your rights. And if we can prove malicious intent, which, given the circumstances and the presence of minor children, we might be looking at punitive damages. You think we have a case? Mr. Daniels smiled grimly. Marissa, I think your parents just made a very expensive mistake. The question is, do you want them to pay for it? I looked over at Ethan and Lily, coloring peacefully in the corner. Ethan was helping his sisters stay inside the lines, their heads bent together over a picture of a house with a white picket fence and flowers in the yard. They deserved so much more than a motel room and a mother who flinched every time someone knocked on the door. Yes, I said, I want them to pay. Good. I'll take this on contingency, 30% of whatever we recover. But Marissa, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about money. Legal action against family? It changes everything. There's no going back. I thought about my mother's face when she closed the door on us, about my father's dismissive voice telling her to let me figure it out, about Vanessa's smug smile as she watched from the window. There was never anything to go back to, I said. Mr. Daniels nodded approvingly. Then let's get started. I'll need you to document everything. Every item that was destroyed, every conversation, every witness who saw what happened. Do you have photos of the damaged belongings? Some, I said, thinking of the pictures I had taken on my phone that night, too stunned to do anything but mechanically record the destruction. Perfect. And Marissa, he leaned forward, his expression serious. I want you to be prepared for them to fight back. People like your parents, who are used to getting their way, they don't like being held accountable. This could get ugly. I stood up, feeling stronger than I had in months. Mr. Daniels, they threw my children's belongings in the rain and locked us out in a storm. It's already ugly. He smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him. Then we understand each other. Let's make them regret the day they decided to mess with you. As we left his office, Ethan tugged on my coat. Mom, are we going to be okay now? I knelt down to his level, looking into eyes that were too old for his 9-year-old face. Better than okay, sweetheart. We're going to be strong. That evening, back at the motel, I spread out papers across the small table. The legal documents Mr. Daniels had given me, a list of everything we'd lost that night, phone numbers for potential witnesses.
For the first time since David left, since the eviction notice, since that terrible night in the rain, I felt like I wasn't just surviving, I was fighting back. Kathy stopped by with dinner from the diner, meatloaf and mashed potatoes that tasted like victory. "How did it go with Mr. Daniels?" I asked. "He thinks we have a case, a good one." She smiled and ruffled Ethan's hair. "Sometimes the law is the only thing that makes bullies play fair." That night, as I tucked my children into their motel bed, Lily asked, "Mommy, are Grandma and Grandpa going to be in trouble?" I smoothed her hair back from her forehead. "Sometimes, baby, when grown-ups make really bad choices, they have to face consequences. Just like when you break a rule, there are consequences." "Good," she said with startling firmness. "They were mean to us." Yes, I thought as I turned off the lights. They were mean. But they were about to learn that their daughter wasn't the helpless little girl they thought they'd thrown away. I was becoming...
I spun a tale of dragons defeated and treasures found, of kingdoms saved and families reunited, until both children drifted off to sleep. Lily curled against Ethan's side, and he wrapped his arm around her protectively, even in his dreams, still trying to shield her from a world that had proven dangerous and unpredictable. I sat by the window, watching the rain tap against the glass, and let myself feel the full weight of what had happened. The betrayal cut deeper than David's abandonment, deeper than the eviction, deeper than anything I'd experienced. Parents were supposed to be your safety net, the people who caught you when you fell. Instead, mine had shoved me off the cliff. But as I sat there in that modest motel room, something unexpected began to grow inside me. Not just anger, though there was plenty of that, but determination. A cold, hard resolve that started in my chest and spread through my veins like steel. I thought about Kathy, counting out her tip money to help strangers, about William, making phone calls on our behalf when he owed us nothing, about Jerry, accepting payment from a friend instead of turning us away. These people, who had never known me, had shown more compassion in one evening than my own parents had shown in 32 years. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notepad app. By the glow of the screen, I started making lists. What I had: a little money, a car that ran, 2 children who needed stability, and a fury that could power a small city. What I needed: a job, a place to live, a plan for the future. The divorce papers were still in my purse, damp but legible. David had cleaned out our joint accounts, but there were things he couldn't touch. My 401k from my old job, a small inheritance from my grandmother that I'd kept separate. Not much, but something. I thought about what William had said, about losing everything when his wife died, about rebuilding from nothing. If he could do it, so could I. I had to. For Ethan and Lily, but also for myself. Outside, the rain was finally stopping. Through the thin motel curtains, I could see the first hints of dawn creeping across the parking lot. My children slept peacefully, secure for the first time in days, and I made them a silent promise. We would never be at anyone's mercy again. Not David's, not my parents', not anybody's. I would build something they couldn't take away, create a life where my children would never have to watch their belongings get thrown in the rain, never have to ask strangers where they could sleep safely. I thought about my parents, probably sleeping soundly in their perfect house with their perfect daughter, convinced they'd taught me a valuable lesson about independence and responsibility. They had no idea what they'd actually done. They'd taken a broken, desperate woman and turned her into something far more dangerous, someone with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The rain stopped completely as the sun began to rise. I pulled the curtains shut, tucked the blanket more securely around my sleeping children, and finally allowed myself to close my eyes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight we were safe. Tonight, we had a roof over our heads and people who cared about our well-being. And tomorrow, I would start building the empire that would make my parents rue the day they threw us away. They wanted to see what their daughter was really made of. They were about to find out. The last thing I remembered before sleep finally took me was the sound of Lily's steady breathing and Ethan's whispered words from earlier. "Are we going to be okay, Mom?" Yes, I thought. We're going to be more than okay. We're going to be unstoppable. 3 days into our stay at the Sunrise Motel, Kathy knocked on our door with a thermos of coffee and a business card that would change everything. She said, "This is Mr. Daniels. He's a good lawyer, helped my nephew with his custody case, and I told him about what happened with your parents." I stared at the simple white card. James Daniels, attorney at law. Family law, housing rights, civil litigation. "Kathy, I can't afford a lawyer. I can barely afford food." "She works on contingency for the right cases," she said with a knowing smile. "And honey, what your parents did, that might just be the right kind of case." An hour later, I sat in Mr. Daniels' modest office while Ethan and Lily colored in the children's corner he'd set up. The office wasn't fancy, secondhand furniture and law books with cracked spines, but the man behind the desk radiated competence and compassion in equal measure. He said, "Tell me exactly what happened," his pen poised over a yellow legal pad. I recounted that night in the rain, my voice steady until I got to the part about my children's belongings scattered across the wet driveway. Then my composure cracked, and Mr. Daniels pushed a box of tissues across his desk without comment. "When had you been living at your parents' house?" he asked when I finished. "I never lived there as an adult, but I had mail delivered there, kept some belongings in my old room. My mother had said I could always come home if I needed to." Mr. Daniels made notes, his expression growing more serious. "And your sister moved into your room without your permission?" "She wasn't even living there when this happened. She has her own apartment across town, but my parents let her use my childhood bedroom as an office space."
"Excuse me, miss?" Ethan set down his spoon and looked directly at Kathy. "Do you know where we can sleep tonight? Somewhere safe?" My heart shattered and mended simultaneously. My little boy, my brave little boy, asking strangers for help because he'd watched his mother fail to provide even the most basic needs. Kathy's eyes filled with tears. She quickly blinked away. "Well," she said slowly, "let me go talk to my boss. William's good people. Maybe we can figure something out." She disappeared into the back and I heard muffled voices. A few minutes later, she returned with a tall, weathered man in his 50s. He had the kind of face that had seen its share of hard times, but his eyes were gentle. "I'm William," he said, extending a calloused hand. "Kathy tells me you folks are having a rough go of it." I shook his hand, surprised by the strength and warmth of his grip. "I'm Marissa. These are my kids, Ethan and Lily. We're just between places right now." He nodded, no judgment in his expression. "Then there myself. Lost my wife 3 years ago, nearly lost the diner too. Sometimes life kicks you when you're down, but good people find a way to help each other back up." Kathy leaned forward. "William, what about that motel situation you mentioned, with Jerry?" "Right," William said. "There's a place about 6 blocks from here. Clean, safe. Owner owes me a favor or two. Let me make a call." He disappeared to use the phone behind the counter, and Kathy refilled our mugs. "William's a good man," she said quietly. "Lost everything when his Martha died. Medical bills, you know? But he rebuilt. Sometimes the hardest times teach us what we're really made of." 20 minutes later, William returned with news that seemed too good to be true. "Jerry's got a room. Weeks paid for. Continental breakfast included." "I can't accept that," I said, even as relief flooded through me. "I don't have any way to pay you back right now." "Who said anything about paying back?" Kathy reached into her apron and pulled out a roll of 1s and 5s. "Tips from tonight. Take it. Kids need food money." I stared at the $60 she pressed into my hand. Money these people had earned serving coffee and cleaning tables. Money they probably needed themselves. I don't know what to say. "Don't say anything," William said. "Just take care of those babies. And when you get back on your feet, and you will, you do the same for somebody else." Outside, the rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle. As we walked to our car, Lily tugged on my coat. "Mommy, are those people angels?" I looked back at the warm glow of the diner, at Kathy wiping down tables and William counting receipts, at the little sanctuary they'd created for people like us. Broken people, desperate people, people who'd lost everything but hadn't given up. "Maybe they are, sweetheart," I said. "Maybe they are." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The Sunrise Motel wasn't much to look at. Single-story building with blue doors and a flickering neon sign, but to us it might as well have been the Ritz-Carlton. Jerry, the desk clerk with tired eyes and a genuine smile, handed me the key to room 127 and told me the ice machine was at the end of the hall. "William's a good people," he said, not making me feel like charity. "Room's yours for the week. Anything you need, just holler." The room smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and old cigarettes, but the beds were made with crisp white sheets and the heater worked. There was a small table by the window, a television that actually turned on, and most importantly, a deadbolt that locked with a solid click. "Can we really stay here?" Lily asked, bouncing tentatively on the edge of one of the double beds. "For a week," I confirmed, setting down our salvage belongings. Most of our things were still damp from the rain, but we could hang them up, let them dry. We had time to think, to plan, to figure out what came next. Ethan explored the small bathroom, testing the faucets, checking the shower. "Mom, there's little shampoo bottles," he called out, with more excitement than tiny toiletries deserved. But I understood. It was the small dignities that mattered when you'd lost everything else. I helped the kids get out of their wet clothes and into the closest thing to pajamas we had. Ethan's oversized t-shirt and Lily's dance leotard that had somehow stayed dry. They looked so small in the big bed huddled together under the scratchy motel comforter. "Tell us a story, Mommy," Lily said, her thumb finding its way to her mouth, a habit she'd mostly outgrown but had returned with all the upheaval. "Once upon a time," I began, "sitting on the edge of their bed, there was a brave princess and her trusty knight who went on a great adventure.
She walked right past us without a word, pulled out her own key, and let herself inside. Through the briefly open door, I heard my mother's warm greeting. 'Vanessa, honey, come in, you're soaked.' The door closed again, leaving us in the darkness. That's when I saw them in the window, my parents and my sister, standing in the warm glow of the living room, watching us. Vanessa said something that made my parents laugh. Then, with deliberate precision, my mother opened the window. 'You can't stay in our driveway all night,' she called out. 'The neighbors will talk.' Then she picked up one of the boxes I'd left by their door earlier, the one with Ethan's school pictures, Lily's stuffed animals, the few precious things I'd managed to save, and tossed it into the rain. The cardboard hit the wet pavement and burst open, scattering my children's memories across the driveway like garbage. Lily's scream pierced the night. Ethan ran toward the scattered toys, slipping on the wet pavement, desperately trying to save what he could. I watched my 9-year-old son crawling in the mud, gathering soggy photographs and waterlogged books, and something turned to steel inside me. I helped Ethan collect what we could salvage, loaded the kids back into the car with their soaked belongings, and drove away from the house where I'd once believed I belonged. In my rearview mirror, I saw the warm light in every window, saw my sister's silhouette in what had been my childhood bedroom, saw the life I would never have. But I made a promise that night, with my children shivering beside me and nowhere to go. Someday, I would own something they could never take away. Someday, they would need something from me, and when that day came, I would remember this rain, this betrayal, this moment when my own parents chose cruelty over love. Someday, they would learn what widow problems really looked like. I drove aimlessly through the rain-soaked streets, my children's quiet snuffles filling the silence between the rhythmic slap of windshield wipers. Every hotel sign that flickered past might as well have been a neon mockery. No vacancy for people like us, people with maxed-out credit cards and empty bank accounts, people whose own families had thrown them away like yesterday's garbage. "Mommy, I'm hungry," Lily whispered from the back seat, her voice hoarse from crying. Ethan, my little protector, immediately shushed her. "Lily, Mom's trying to drive. Don't bother her." "You're not bothering me, baby," I said, catching his eyes in the rearview mirror. 9 years old, and he was already trying to shoulder burdens that weren't his to carry. "We're going to find somewhere to eat, okay? Somewhere warm." That's when I saw it, a neon sign cutting through the rain like a lighthouse beacon. Mel's Diner, open 24 hours. The parking lot was mostly empty except for a few cars that looked as beat up as mine, and through the steamy windows, I could see the warm yellow glow of fluorescent lights. We sat in the car for a moment, the engine ticking as it cooled. I counted the crumpled bills in my wallet, $37 and some change. Enough for a meal.
maybe 2 if we shared. Not enough for a room anywhere decent. Okay, guys, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Let's go get some food and warm up. The bell above the diner door chimed as we stepped inside, and the smell of coffee and fried food wrapped around us like a hug. It was one of those old-fashioned places with red vinyl booths and checkered linoleum floors, the kind where the waitresses called you "hun" and the coffee never got cold. A woman with graying brown hair and kind eyes looked up from behind the counter. She wore a name tag that read Kathy, and her uniform was pristine despite what must have been a long shift. Her gaze took in our soaked clothes, Ethan's protective stance beside his sister, the way Lily clung to my hand with white knuckles. "Oh, honey," she said softly, coming around the counter. "Look at you all. Come on, come sit down." She led us to a corner booth away from the few other late-night customers. "Let me get you some towels." She returned with clean dish towels and 3 steaming mugs of hot chocolate before I'd even opened the menu. "On the house," she said when I started to protest. "Kids need to warm up." Lily wrapped her small hands around the mug like it was a lifeline, and for the first time in hours she stopped shivering. Ethan sipped his chocolate carefully, his eyes never leaving my face, still trying to gauge how scared he should be. "Rough night?" she asked gently, sliding into the booth across from us. "The worst," I whispered. She didn't push for details. Instead, she brought us grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, comfort food that tasted like hope. While the kids ate, she sat with us, talking about ordinary things. The weather, the new stoplight they had installed down the street, anything but the fact that we were obviously homeless and desperate.
The little girl who'd once cried in the rain was gone forever. In her place was a woman who'd learned that the best revenge isn't just living well, it's making sure the people you love never have to live through what you survived. And that, I thought, as I turned off the lights and headed to my own room, was a pretty good way to win. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.